Tell me if you've heard this before. You should always get to know someone before you marry them. Meet their parents, colleagues, and even their enemies. You should experience all the different dimensions and sides to a person before you give them the opportunity of a serious commitment, especially when it's for life. But what if you had woken up one morning with a woman in bed next to you, with a ring on both her finger and yours? Most people would laugh the statement off as some sort of a drunken night gone wrong. Something you would only see in a cartoon. But not for me. For me, it was a reality. The woman in question was familiar yet alien at the same time. I possessed memories of her, that much was true. They were vivid, but I never remembered experiencing or actually going through any of them. Not a single one. Even our wedding seemed so grandiose and planned out in my head. However, I can't recall what it felt like to say, I do, or any of the stress that came with the planning beforehand. Yet despite all of that, I knew her name, her favorite color, and her birthday. But trying to remember what led me to obtain that information left me with a blank canvas in my mind. Some memories were much more potent than others. Some weren't even there at all, even though in my head I swore up and down they should have been. She turned over to me in bed, running a soft hand along my chest as she groaned with morning grog. She was definitely beautiful. There was no denying that. Her face and body were stunning. Black flowing hair, teeth as white as winter snow. She possessed eyes so elegantly brown, one could mistake them for Hershey kisses. Good morning, sweetie. She kissed my cheek. Should we make some breakfast? I forced a smile, chalking up my suspicion to simply being hungover from the previous night. Maybe we had just decided to have a drink together, and I bit off more than I could chew. Yeah, that sounds great actually. Well, of course it does, silly, she said as she began to climb out of bed, and to which I followed, almost compelled too by her alluring appearance. Even her favorite breakfast foods were easy to remember. She loved eggs, bacon, although wasn't very fond of toast, but I usually ended up making some for just myself. That's what my memory allowed me to recall anyway. Her name was Lucia. She was 26 years old and currently employed as an accountant. She was quite soft-spoken, but stern when needed. We had been together for 3 years before I proposed, and we became engaged for several months. From what I could gather about her family, her father wasn't quite fond of me at first. Not that it was a rare occurrence. Her mother was not in the picture. One memory informed me Lucia had told me her mother had died giving birth to her. As for myself, I've been working as an electrician for the last several years, making a pretty good salary. Seeing as our house was definitely equipped to hold a family, it was no mansion by any means, but it was everything a couple with no kids needed, plus a little more. I was more than satisfied with it. I examined Lucia as we cooked breakfast together. She hummed a song I didn't quite recognize as she scrambled the eggs in a bowl. Nonetheless, it was a beautiful tune. I unintentionally nodded my head along to it. What song is that, hon? I asked, casually opening the fridge to grab orange juice. I forgot the name actually. All I know is my brothers used to sing it a lot when we were growing up. Brothers, I thought to myself. No memories popped up in my head about any brothers that she had. That was one of the many things that had left me puzzled since this morning. What are your brothers up to these days? I questioned, doing some subtle probing to find out more and fill the gaps. Lucia smirked, pouring the eggs into a pan and letting them sizzle as they collided with hot metal. They visit us every day, you dork, she teased gleefully. My dad always calls them over. And once again, my memory had failed me. But that didn't stop my curiosity. So I kept asking her about the brothers thing. Yeah, well, it meant stuff like their hobbies and interests. Once again, she simply smiled and brushed off my question, as if I should have already known what she was referring to. I tried to keep the morning peaceful and simply sat down and ate the breakfast that we had both prepared together. I did my best to strike up conversation about other topics, trying to learn as much as I could about the other aspects of what I was missing. You can imagine my frustration when everything we talked about had been a rehearsal of what I already knew. Little to no details of anything we discussed ever surprised me or jogged my memory. Part of me felt like she was hiding information on purpose. Honey, when my dad came over last time, he mentioned that he wants you to check out the backyard. Thinks that we might have moles. I mentally dug around for any memories of a molehole in the backyard. It was once again something I had no memory of. Not even any vague mentions or conversations relating to it. I'll go take a look, I informed Lucia, planting a kiss on her cheek as she stood up to clear off the table. Maybe spending a little bit of time away from her separately was what I needed. I slipped my shoes on and headed into the backyard to check out the molehole. I completely remembered the layout of the yard, even where certain leaves were scattered. Yet there was a strange oak tree that had grown right in the exact center of the grassy expanse. I didn't have any recollection of it previously being there. Autumn leaves blew in the wind and fell off the tree, landing in random locations around the yard and that of our neighbors. I kept my guard up while slowly approaching the tree. There was a certain indescribable aura around it. It didn't feel like it belonged there. Not at all. I stopped once I was just about a foot away. My eyes circled around the tree and my heart leapt out of my chest as I tripped and nearly fell. On the opposite of the tree was a hole, a little over 6 feet in diameter. I was only inches away from falling right in when I had tripped. The hole was deep, endlessly deep. I looked down and was greeted with nothing but the sights of a bottomless, pitch-black abyss. What the hell? I blurted, scratching my head in a completely puzzled expression. I couldn't take my eyes off the sights in front of me. The hole was as unsettling as it was fascinating. How had it even gotten here? Who dug this? How was it even possible to dig something like this in the first place without some sort of a special drill? Question after question raced through my head with no satisfying answer. This definitely was no molehole. That much was obvious. "Good morning, sir," came a strange male voice from behind me. I quickly turned, laying my eyes upon a young man. He looked no older than in his mid-20s. He carried a dirty shovel in one hand and a stack of papers in the other, while wearing dirt-stained jeans and a simple white t-shirt with a strange logo on the front, along with a red baseball cap on the top of his head. Behind him, I noticed varying degrees of drilling and digging equipment. "And you are?" I interrogated. "I'm the contractor your wife hired. The name's Lewis," he smiled. "We spoke on the phone a few days ago. I have the call logs here if you want to look them over." He punctuated by waving the stack of papers in his hand. I gotta admit, his enthusiasm was infectious, especially when he had a job like this. Yeah, I would actually." I cautiously walked up and grabbed the papers. Scanning through them one by one proved what he was saying. The call had come from my wife's phone number. She had told him to come dig near the old tree in order to trick the supposed moles that we had, and to digging their way into the endless pit so they would die. But this was currently the only hole in the backyard. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt and assume the other ones had previously been taken care of. Lucy, however, had never mentioned multiple holes. "Why didn't she say anything about you before?" I asked, handing the papers back. "Well, sir, I can't answer that. But if this isn't a good time, I can come back later." No, it's fine," I reassured him. "I'm just gonna go talk to her quickly." When I marched back into the house and looked around for Lucia, I looked back and gave Louis a few glances. He still kept that same enthusiastic and contagious smile every time I looked at him. When I made it inside and called out for Lucia, she wasn't anywhere to be found. I even went out on my way to check the bedroom and bathrooms to no avail. The kitchen was empty as well. After a little bit of pointless searching, I chalked it up to her simply going to work and not giving me a heads up. Instead of going to work myself, I had called in sick. It felt necessary to stay at home and get to the bottom of my strange feelings. Working around high-voltage machines wasn't an intelligent idea in the weird mental state that I was in. The first thing I did after calling in was start rummaging through Lucia's things. But to no one's shock, going through her bags, clothes, and dresser led me to find nothing that shouldn't have been there. Everything was normal in that regard. Next, I tried the bathroom, which also proved to be nothing of interest. I genuinely thought I was starting to lose it. One half of me felt like I was completely overthinking this whole situation, that this was all some big internal misunderstanding and that I shouldn't question it any further. But it couldn't have been that simple. There was something more to this. I just knew it. Ignoring it would eat me up for the rest of my life, if it wasn't even real in the first place. I made a quick trip back to the bedroom for one last sweep. I figured it was worth a final shot. As much as the movies may lead you to think otherwise, there was nothing intriguing in the basement or attic. I got down on one knee to look under the bed, darting my eyes back and forth on the dirty floor beneath. Toward Lucia's side of the bed, I spotted an envelope covered in dust and crumbs. The thing looked like it had been there for multiple years without being moved in the slightest. I reached a hand out and grabbed it. Dust flew off in all directions as I tore it open. There was no formal address or information you would usually find on an envelope in the mail. The only thing written on the front in blue ink was two simple words: "No repentance." Huh. I huffed audibly before starting to open it. Inside were two items: a printed out picture with a letter that seemed to go along with it. The picture depicted a family that I had never seen before, all sitting in what appeared to be their backyard during a cookout. A youthful, well-dressed female stood between a young boy and girl. Both seemed only about 12 years old, clearly the mother of the family. To the right of them was where the father would have been if he hadn't been torn out of the picture. The only thing left of his existence in the image were the pair of jeans that he was wearing. They only went up to the knees as the rest of him had been ripped out from the photo. I pulled the note out from the envelope and unfolded it after finishing looking up at the picture. The note read as follows: "This image is a lie, a perfect example of what he claims our family is. But he's a monster. Do not let his false display of comforting family connection trick you. He says he'll kill me if I call the cops or tell anyone. I need help. Please, somebody help me. The kids and I can't take it anymore. I'm going to sneak away with them one of these days. I need for the time to be right." I think it's pretty clear the conclusion I came to after reading it. I punctuated my feelings out loud by rubbing my forehead and sighing, comprehending the horrific implications of the note. I put the note down and looked at the picture one last time. There was an incalculable amount of questions going through my head, and having no answers only made it worse. I truly felt alone with this problem, like I was living in some dystopia where everyone knows what's going on but me. "What a piece of crap," I said out loud. "What's a piece of crap?" I turned to find Lucia standing in the doorframe behind me with a puzzled expression. Her appearance had shifted from what it was just a couple of hours ago. Her eyes were much more bloodshot, her skin was slightly sunburned, and her lips were intensely chapped. "I thought you went to work, honey," I told her, doing my best to sound authentic and not mention the odd shift in her looks. "What? It's not a work day," she corrected me, her voice now slightly scratchy. "I was out running errands." "Oh," I announced, being caught off guard. But before I could ask why she hadn't told me beforehand, she interrupted with a question of her own. "What are you looking at over there?" she inquired, now crossing her arms as she glared at me. "This." I pointed at the picture and note. "Just found this under the bed. It was on your side. Do you know anything about it?" "You mind if I see it, honey?" She held out her hand, also ignoring my question in the process. I took notice that her fingernails were much less sanitary than when I had last seen them. Dirt and grime had stripped away the previously pristine, white presentation of them. Yeah, sure," I replied, handing her the items. I took her looking over the note as an opportunity to ask her about Louis. "So, what's the deal about the guy in our backyard? And that hole, too." "You mean Louis?" she responded without even looking up. "He's a contractor. You wanted me to give him a call, remember?" "No, I don't remember actually," I said, now standing up on my feet, letting the irritation that I was feeling display itself on my face. Getting lied to was slowly getting old, and I was getting fed up. Everything from her dodging the questions to hiding information was really getting under my skin. Why the hell is he digging a massive hole in our backyard? What's the purpose of it? It doesn't make any sense. "It's a surprise, honey," she said firmly. I could tell she wanted the conversation to be over already. "So, having a random guy from a company I don't even know the name of, and digging an impossibly deep hole in our backyard, is the setup for some big surprise." I stepped closer to Lucia after finishing my small tirade. Her expression turned to one of nervousness. The tension between us only rose as I met her face to face. "What is it with you? I try to do something nice and this is how you react." She sneered at me. "So, asking questions makes me the devil now. You're not telling me things. You're lying, acting weird. And I'm pretty sure that you drugged me for Christ's sake." "Drugged you? Are you seriously accusing me of something that heinous? Why would I drug my own freaking husband? Are you even listening to yourself?" I took a deep, seething breath. "Move," I demanded forcefully. "I won't ask a second time." "And if I don't?" Lucia stood her ground. We both stood there completely frozen and unsure of what to do. I could see Lucia subtly getting into a defensive stance. I could tell my display of anger was scaring her. I took a step back and changed my posture to a more open stance, not wanting the tension to rise any higher. "Never mind. It doesn't matter, not a big deal." I huffed while unclenching my fist and relaxing my hands. "What is wrong with you?" Lucia inquired as she stepped aside and allowed me to exit the bedroom. I walked away without saying another word and risking flaring up another argument. Now, while I forgave Lucia for acting strange, it doesn't change the nature of everything that's been going on for the entire day. I tried to get through the rest of the day doing normal things I hadn't gotten the chance to indulge in up to this point. Watching the game, having a beer, and attempting to forget about all that had transpired. The evening went by as slowly as you can imagine. I door-dashed myself and Lucia dinner because I was too mentally exhausted to cook. It wasn't until the food had actually gotten there that I realized how hungry I actually was. I scarfed it all down like an animal, most of it without taking a single sip of my drink. We ate in separate rooms of the house. The tension that had arisen earlier now fell into an eerie silence, and I knew for a fact that it would stay that way for the remainder of the night. I flipped through channel after channel on the TV and switched on the living room lamp. The light showered the room and reflected everything happening on the big window to the right. I had forgotten to shut the curtains. As I was mindlessly scrolling through potential things to watch, something in the window caught my attention. It was only just in the corner of my eye, but still prominent enough for me to take notice. I could make out the figure of Lucia standing right behind me. She looked much skinnier, impossibly thin. I was almost sure I could see her bones sticking out of her elbows. Even her fingernails had extended to far longer than what most people would consider hygienic. I snapped my head around in response, preparing myself for the hair-raising sight that I was soon to lay my eyes on. But when I turned, Lucia was standing there looking as she did previously, much less monstrous than her reflection counterpart, but still rough around the edges. My stupid brain was just playing tricks on me again, right? "Hey, I'm going to bed," she pronounced calmly. "I'm sorry about everything today. Hopefully tomorrow isn't the same." I hesitated before replying, darting my eyes between her and my recently polished off can of beer. "It's all good. We'll have a fresh start tomorrow." Wow, what a great apology. She stormed off, allowing me to hear her angry footsteps towards the bedroom. "I can tell you really meant that," Lucia punctuated as she disappeared into the hallway. I made no attempt to follow or go after her. I figured it was better to let her cool off and have her alone time, especially with the state that I was in. The alcohol had calmed me down enough not to let her snarky comment infuriate me. One thing that had popped back into my head was the note under the bed that I had found. And then I also remembered Lucia saying that her father brings her brothers over every day, and yet I still hadn't seen them this entire day. I got up and crushed my beer can before marching over to the kitchen and tossing it. In my head, all I could think about was going to the fridge and getting another, sitting down, relaxing, and then eventually joining Lucia in bed once she had diffused her attitude. It was when I tilted my head up and took a peek out the kitchen window. It was when my heart sank. I stopped in place. The bang of the beer can hitting the ground of the trash bin seemed extra loud in the silence of the house. The tree that was in front of the so-called mole hole was now gone. The hole was now on full display in our backyard. It seemed to have grown in its diameter, being nearly double what it was before. I hadn't heard Lewis do anything to chop the tree down. It was impossible for him to have gotten it out of here without making any noise. That tree was far too thick to cut with just an axe. That is, in a reasonable amount of time. I turned to start walking down to the bedroom to talk to Lucia. My footsteps were heavy this time around. My nostrils flared up and my fists were once again clenched. The alcohol's calming effects were being overpowered by my temper. Turning the corner and wandering down the hallway, I made a swift stop at the bedroom door and put my hand on the knob. Once I turned it, however, it didn't open. Lucia had locked it from the inside. "Lucia," I raised my voice as I pounded on the door in fury. "Open the door now. I'm done playing these stupid little games." Lucia didn't respond verbally. Instead, a faint scratching came from the bottom of the door. It was cringe-inducing and made me want to cut my ears and my hands. It was worse than nails on a chalkboard. And covering my ears only did so much to relieve me of it. The scratching slowly moved its way up the door, keeping that same annoying, ear-shattering pitch as it ascended. "Lucia," I practically shouted. "Stop!" She refused to use words yet again. I could feel my blood boiling now. I was ready to tear the dang door off its hinges and barge right in. I had grown tired of her gaslighting and manipulating me. "I'm gonna knock down this dang door. You better. My sentence was quickly cut off. Lucia began to bang on the door from the other side. They were much more violent than what I was even planning on. It was like she had read my mind. Bang after bang, thud after thud. Her forceful blows threatened to annihilate the entire doorframe. The punches she delivered were out of anger or malice. She didn't need to say anything for that to click in my head. That's when I decided to back away from the door, slowly but surely placing one foot after another, cautiously as I distanced myself, not wanting her to hear me. The banging only became more intense as I got further away. It was like she could sense my movement. It didn't matter how quiet I tried to be. I started to pick up the pace and dart away from the bedroom in a light jog. I had only made it several feet when the sound of the door being completely detached and thrown off of its hinges drowned my eardrums. She was out of the room now, and she was coming. I could hear the rapid footsteps behind me. I sped up and down the hall and past the living room, now running in an almost near sprint. She was gaining on me, but yet her footsteps now sounded much more plentiful, like she was running with more than just 2 feet. I refused to look back at her, fearful of whatever terrifying sight would be waiting for me. As she chased me through the house, she didn't scream, talk, or make any sounds other than her aggressive stampeding, accompanied by the noise her nails made when being dragged across the carpet, the wood, and the tile. I dashed through the kitchen and had finally made it to the back door, quickly swinging the dang thing open and trying to lunge myself forward outside. But not before Lucia had grabbed me by the ankle. Her fingernails made me grind my teeth as they sank into my delicate flesh. "Got you," she snarled. Her voice had transformed from an innocent, light, feminine pitch to a much more sinister, scratchy, and terrifying sound. A sound I wouldn't wish my worst enemy to hear. She dragged me along the backyard towards the hole. I kicked and screamed and tried to wiggle myself free, but her strength had grown far beyond what a woman of her size should have been capable of. I was still yet to see what she had actually looked like now. I dug my nails into the grass, trying desperately to slow her down. "Lucia, let me go," I demanded. "I'm sorry." "Oh, now you're sorry," she chuckled tauntingly in that spine-chilling voice. "It's too late for you once again," she replied with a cold tone. "What are you talking about?" I shot back. Lucia stopped as we were now just inches away from the hole. She turned around, allowing me to get a glimpse of her dreadful appearance. Her face was now elongated. Her chin nearly hung down to her chest. Her fingernails were longer than any animal's claws I had ever seen. Her hair had turned frizzy and dry. Parts of it had fallen out and exposed her rough scalp. Her eyes had completely disappeared, now being replaced with black voids similar to that of the hole. She growled inhumanly as she stared me down. Her grip tightened around my leg and I felt her fingernails dig deeper into my skin. Blood leaked out from these small punctures in my leg. Lucia pulled harder and slung me forward. I felt my back scrape across the ground before I was soon met with the sensation of weightlessness. I screamed and stretched my arms as I fell down into the abyss. The world at the surface slowly became smaller and faded away as I descended downward. The pitch-black darkness swallowed me up faster than I could process. My mind was telling me that this would be it. This would be the end. I'd hit the bottom of whatever this hellish pit led to, and I would become a human smoothie. To my genuinely grateful surprise, the impact never came. I had only fallen for what seemed like 30 seconds. I felt my feet on the ground once again. It was really cold though, metallic and smooth. This metallic material only made that worse. I wasn't complaining. It was blissful compared to the sensation I had just experienced. My life was flashing before my eyes the entire time that I was falling. I got to my feet, looked around, and found myself in some sort of room. It appeared to be a bunker of some kind. Although the interior of the room was barren with no sort of furnishing or equipment, just gray metal walls, ceilings, and floor. When I glanced upwards, the hole that I had fallen through was completely covered by a thick layer of metal. Steel was my first guess, but the entire room was covered in it. It was simply a rectangular expanse of the stuff, a little cramped as well with not much space to move around. I covered my eyes as a reflex when a bright orange light had suddenly flooded the room. There was no clear direction where it had come from. Not only that, but I could feel the temperature beginning to rise. My forehead began to sweat and I could feel my clothing beginning to stick to me due to the perspiration on my body. "It's good to see you again," said a familiar voice. I quickly turned and there stood Lewis. A calm smile spread across his face. "What even is this?" I demanded. "What did you do? What happened to Lucia? Why is she that freaking thing?" Lewis's expression stayed consistent through my panicked rambling. He simply kept his arms crossed as he stood in place. "I'm Lucia's father," he said cheerfully. "Sorry about forgetting to mention that earlier. Actually, no, I'm not sorry, seeing as I just keep doing it over and over." "You've got a lot more explaining to do than just that," I growled, now starting to step toward him. Lewis nonchalantly held up a hand and I stopped, but not by my own free will. I could feel the force of some sort tugging at my back for me to stay put, and despite no physical object or person being behind me when I looked. "Would you mind if I did a little reading?" Lewis asked rhetorically. I watched him reach for his front left pocket and retrieve the note that I had found earlier from the bedroom, along with the picture as well. "How did you get that?" He held the note up in front of him and ignored me. He then dramatically cleared his throat and began slowly reading it out loud. "This image is a lie, a perfect example of what he claims our family is. But he's a monster. Do not let his false display of comforting family connection trick you. He says he'll kill me if I call the cops or tell anyone. I need help. Please, somebody help me. The kids and I can't take it anymore. I'm going to sneak away with them one of these days. I need for the time to be right." I felt my knees starting to give out as he finished reading. I tumbled to the floor but still stayed within the same general area I was previously standing. My stomach churned and my muscles weakened. It felt like the sky was falling on me, and the heat inside the room had only gotten worse. I couldn't move my arms to wipe the sweat away. "That does sound like quite the monster, doesn't it?" Lewis chuckled. His voice had deepened in pitch. I felt my neck being forcefully moved up towards Lewis, and there I laid pathetically on the ground as he towered over me and took pleasure in my agony. As he held up the picture in front of me, the mystery husband that had been torn out began to fade back into it, as if it were repairing itself. The picture reconstructed the damaged part right in front of me. The husband. It was me. I was the man in the note the mother of that family was talking about. Lewis cackled as all the real memories started to come back to me. I was truly what the note had described. A monster. The things I had said and done to the kids along with my wife. My real wife. Her name was Alyssa. I murdered her when she had tried to take them away from me for their protection. It was replaying in my head like a movie. We fought bloody knuckles. I had just stabbed her in the heart and she was slowly passing out. But not before getting a shot in the neck by my own daughter, who had taken the gun from my nightstand. The look of fear and horror in her eyes would be one I would never forget. All of the things that had happened today were my punishment, the consequences of being such a horrendous father and husband. Lewis then took a few steps back and knelt down to get eye to eye with me. "You should rest up, damned one. You've got a big day just like this one ahead of you tomorrow. and the day after that as well. Eternity is a long time, you know. I heard dozens of terrifying laughs come from behind. I couldn't physically turn around to see what was making them, but I was sure I would come to find out soon enough. "What are they?" I shrieked at Lewis. "Oh, those." Lewis once again smirked. "Those are Lucia's brothers.